Good evening. I'd like to call to order this special town council meeting, April 20th, 2022, on the budget. Please rise for a moment of silence. The Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Allenson? Here. Carmody?
Here.
Fishbein? Laffin?
Here.
Marone? Tata?
Here.
Testa? Zandri?
Here.
And Chairman Cervoni.
Here. All right. First up is the Board of Education. You could just remind us who you are for the record, please.
Good evening, Tammy Raccio, Board of Ed Chair.
Good evening, Danielle Belizzi, Superintendent, Wallingford Public Schools.
Good evening, Dominic Barone, Business Manager.
So have we not overcome our hardware, software, digital issue? Okay.
No, we'll just do it this way. That's fine.
We'll get our PowerPoint on paper.
Yes, you'll get it on paper. So in front of you, you should have a copy of the PowerPoint. So I'll just go through it this way for now, if that's okay. So thank you and good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to present the budget for the Wallingford Board of Education for the 22-23 school year. I'd like to thank, before we get started, our central office team, our Board of Education members, our building administrators, our curriculum coordinators, for all their help and hard work in putting this budget together that we're going to present to you this evening. So during this presentation tonight, we're going to give an overview of our sustained budget. We'll identify and highlight some of our strategic items, and we'll go through what we have recommended thus far in this process. So as you move through, I'll just have you open up and go to page 2. I know at one of the previous meetings there were some public comments and some questions for the Board of Education. So I did on this side include answers towards the end of this presentation, which I'll go over at that time. I know there were questions regarding the central office lease, adult education, and the all-school study. So those are starting on page 29 to the end of the slide presentation. As we move through the presentation, a lot of what you'll see within this budget is what we consider a lot of our budget drivers. So there's things we took into account as we created this budget, such as our student enrollment, our contractual obligations, which are our salary increases in transportation and maintenance, and our certified, non-certified staff, our insurance and utilities. And then finally, I'll talk about our strategic plan. Page 4 highlights our enrollment. So as you look at this slide, you'll see that our total enrollment for the projection for next year is slightly decreasing. So we have showed that there is a difference, and we're going to continue to watch that, but our enrollment is going down. In addition, you'll notice on this slide that our special education in 504 population is continuing to grow. So that's where students who are in need of services for special education in 504, that number is growing this year. And a lot of what we attribute that to is these past 2 years within the pandemic. So the academic loss, the lack of structure for what we had, the increase in need instructionally and social emotionally. There were a lot of changes that contributed to this in terms of schedules, remote learning, trauma and changes in the home life and within school, and anxiety to come back. So we are seeing that as we've moved through. So I definitely wanted to highlight that. In addition, you'll notice that our EL population has also continued to grow, and we attribute that to our changing demographics and population. So that is also another area of need, which I will identify later on throughout this presentation. And lastly, the free and reduced population. So while here it indicates that it has gone down, this past year, we have been able to serve free lunch and free breakfast for every student. While we did require and ask parents to fill out the forms to qualify anyway through the state, some did and some did not. So that does change, and I don't really think gives us an accurate number of the amount of families that would qualify. So that's something we'll continue to watch, and obviously when it comes again in the beginning of the school year in the fall, we're gonna continue to maintain asking them to fill out those applications. A point of note is the free lunch and breakfast will end on June 30th of this year, so that will change for summer serving and for the school year. So those that do not fill out the forms and qualify, it will be a paid lunch and paid breakfast. Slide 5 and 6. Starting with slide 5, I think this is also another great indicator and reference point for everyone to really see the need that we're seeing in both our schools and community level in terms of our students needing access to mental health services. This is the 211, which is a service that is free, that has provides support to families and to students, mental health support, and it is something that we can access in our buildings and have. I think this graph is very telling in the sense that it compares 2020-21 to the current school year and the number of times that families have accessed or we have accessed, because it's kind of community-based, 211 and required the need for services. Just looking alone at March, you can see from the previous year it was at 71, and now it's up to 102. Or even looking February to March of this year, you can definitely see the difference of 64 to 102. So you definitely can see the need. We are fortunate in Wallingford that we do have support staff. We have a full-time social worker and school psychologist at every elementary school. We have a number at our middle schools and high schools. But even within that, we're feeling that there is definitely a need for additional support in this area moving forward to provide what we need for our students and families. Slide 6 really is just another way of representing, and it's more breaking down that last number of 102 through substance abuse, crisis intervention and suicide, and then mental health. Slide 7 talks about parts of what we've developed for our sustained services. As I mentioned earlier, there are our budget drivers. So this section here just illustrates the certified staff reduction moving forward. Every year we take a look at the enrollment, like I mentioned earlier, of our students, and we do continue to follow the guidelines that's provided by the board of in classes K to 2, up to 21 students in a class, in grades 3 to 5, up to 23. With that, we are looking at a reduction of 2 elementary teachers with a cost savings, and then an increase of 1 special education teacher and 1 EL teacher, which would give us an increase. Based on the needs that we're seeing, those are things we feel like we need in order to maintain providing our students with the services that they require. Non-certified staff increase, we're looking to add 1 clerical employee in our special education department. We have severance benefits to pay to our certified staff in July. We have 15 staff members retiring and 2 administrators. And then service benefits to our non-certified staff we will pay as well in July. Slide 8 indicates the contractual increases for all of our unions that we have. I just included the union and the percentage increase that we are taking into account moving forward. And the last box discusses the certified staff retirement savings and the non-certified staff retirement savings. So based on those that are retiring and us anticipating that they will come in at a lower step, this is what we see the difference to be there. On slide 9, this slide that first box talks about insurance. So you'll see further on through the presentation, there are 2 initial budget requests that we had. The first one included an 8% increase for our insurance, and then we revised it later on to include the 12.8% increase for our health insurance moving forward, which was a substantial increase to the budget as well of $717,000. Transportation. So the contractual increase for next year is 3%. Thank you for the other evening and approving the bid waiver. We appreciate that. We will maintain the 3% increase from the current contract, even with the new carrier, and then move forward from there. We still will have the budget decrease savings. They're listed there, even with the new contract. We've included contractual increases for maintenance across the 6 contracts for cleaning and 1 contract that will be renewed. Page 10, we were notified here for the estimated water and sewer and electricity of a rate change and a reduction based on the historical consumption, based after we had started our budget process and had planned for that, so we did make an adjustment for that. And then our estimated fuel. At this time, we're not locked in on oil or natural gas, so we're going to continue to monitor that and see what the oil will look like and when it's a good time to lock in a rate for that. Slide 11 talks about our unencumbered fund balance. And so you can see here, if you take a look at one side, you'll see the contingency benefits and as it goes through. And these are a total that gives us the operating budget projection, of $450,000. In these items here, there are things that we have continue to watch because there are some, this money may change even though it is projecting right now at a $450,000. It may change as it moves through. It does fluctuate depending on services we need to provide from now to the remainder of the year. We did look at strategic items that we would like to identify that could be purchased using this money, such as updating our laptops and a plow truck. They're items that have been on our strategic budget that these funds could be used for. An IT vehicle are just a few of the items that we've identified based on this. Slide 12 gives a breakdown of the sustained budget comparison by objects. You'll see the object code description and the related services and revised budget, sustained budget. I want to just indicate just a few and point out just a few. You'll notice under object code 100 personnel, that is a big part of our budget. It's at 3%. Employee benefits, which is where our health insurance is at 9%. And down supplies is the 23.60% increase, which is where the gas, oil, instructional supplies lie within our budget to make up the sustained overall of 2.98%. Slide 13 are items that we had prioritized as a central office staff and Board of Education together. These are our main strategic items that we have prioritized that we feel the need. So the first one is the elementary childhood coordinator. So when we took a look at our 4 elementary schools that house our preschool, currently they're spread within the 4 elementary schools that are housed pre-K, and that is a total of 238 preschool students, which has 15 teachers, 29 paraeducators, and a handful of other additional support members. Currently, our Assistant Superintendent for Special Education, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and the 4 building administrators oversee those programs. They've done a fabulous job. I just think for continuity purposes, professional development, overseeing the curriculum and instruction that is being implemented, the PPT meetings, the needs of the students, to have one person overseeing that for consistency purposes, we felt would be beneficial. We also wanted to add 2 additional instructional coaches to provide adult support for the district in the areas of lesson planning and implementation of instructional strategies, data analysis. A part-time health office assistant at one of our elementary schools. All of other schools have one. This particular elementary school does not, so we'd like to add one there. Maintenance is requiring a compact tractor to replace the one that is 31 years old. And 3 social workers. So the social workers kind of ties into the slides from 211, indicating the need of the increase, because we are seeing that. So we'd like to add additional staff to support those students and families, primarily at our middle and high school level, so one on either side of town and then one district level, depending on student need. And the last item we have on there is the resurfacing of the track and replace the turf at Martesian High School. So that track was, and let me just correct my notes here and make sure, was done in 2007 and in need of repair and work. So that is that item there. So moving along to slide 15, you'll see that the total budget request, we initially started with the health insurance at 8%, gave a total of 4.91%. We then, when we had the change with the health insurance and the increase, it went up to 4.88%. So you can see the breakdown with sustained services and strategic. The sustained would be at the 2.98%. And if we were granted those strategic items, it would be an additional 1.90%. Capital items. We had identified 5 capital items. At 4 of our schools, the air conditioning for the server rooms in 4 of them. Dag Middle School would require the gym floor replacement, a window replacement design work at 3 of our schools, and then adding connecting sidewalks from the pods to the main walks at Rock Hill. After meeting with the mayor on slide 18, I go through what he has recommended to us, which is a 2.98%, which basically is our revised sustained services for the following school year. In addition, on slide 19, you'll see capital items that were also recommended and proposed by the mayor, were all of them except the Rock Hill one. So I just put a little asterisk on that one to say not funded. Slide 20 indicates the budget outcomes from the previous year. You can see the sustained service strategic, the percentage dollar amount, and then what the mayor had approved, and then the town council's approval. Slide 22 is reference to our 2% fund. So on this page, you'll see the allocated items, such as the energy efficiency, equipment, facilities study, security items, and then the unallocated, which is our COVID contingency and the special education contingency, which gives the total at the end. Just to share some of the items within this, energy efficiency, we're basing some of those things that we need to get done based on the audit that we had done, and there are some equipment and things that need to be updated at some of our elementary schools. So Mr. Deptula is going through and identifying some of those. Facility study is the study that has just begun for the all schools. These next slides will then reference our grants. So if you take a look at slide 24, there are a few items that I just would like to identify and discuss on this slide before we get into the others. These grants and the funding that we receive from these they supplement the yearly budget requests. So they are broken down between entitlement grants and competitive grants. So I just felt it important to kind of just specify out in case somebody was looking at this, what the types of grants are that we have. I just provided a few examples just to see the difference between the ones that are entitlement grants and the ones that are competitive grants. I have to say our staff does a wonderful job at applying for and making sure to see what is available for us as a district and it helps us to provide additional supports for our staff and students. So starting on slide 25, these are all of our COVID-19 relief fund grants. So on these slides, you will see the name of the grant, the years that they are going for when they're ending, how long. Some of them are 1 year, some of them are over multiple years. So we try to indicate exactly what our expenditures would be for each year and break it down because some of them have passed and some of them will be broken down over a certain number of years. For example, the ARP ESSER one, which is one of the larger ones we've received, that we've broken down over 3 years. We have the ability to break that down that way. We can revise every 6 months based on the needs of our students and what we're seeing and what the pandemic is what we're dealing with and going through that. A lot of these funds to date have been used for PPE within our schools, providing masks and hand sanitizer, in addition to a lot of the staffing, the additional staffing to help with the instructional pieces and components, the social emotional needs, so it would be staffing the remote learning teachers that we have, COVID cleaners, additional health office assistants for our sick rooms, summer school programming, after school programming. So that's where a lot of these allocations and funding has gone to. If you take a look at slide 26, there are additional grants here. These are grants that we continue to monitor and make sure that we are allocating. All of these grants come with their own term, their guidelines as to how you can spend the money, what you qualify for. So they all have specific purposes attached to them. Many of them are one-year grants. Same thing on slide 27. So we did try, I know last time we were here, there was discussion on the grants that we received, so we wanted to make sure we went through and indicated the kind that we receive and apply for, the years that they're good for, and the dollar amount that goes with it. Okay, slide 28 begins the portion of where the questions had come from the public. So I'll start off with the central office lease, I'll go into adult education, and then our all-school study. So slide 29, currently central office is at 100 South Turnpike. This is the breakdown of the lease information that we have. So currently we're nearing the end of year 1 of the 5-year lease. So you can see here the monthly rent, the percentage of increase as it moves through. If you take a look at slide 30, the second box explains if we are ever looking to terminate the lease early, what the parameters of that are and what the language is to go with that. Dr. Menzo really took a look at this and negotiated that if we are ever afforded an opportunity to move into a town-owned building or another building within here, we would be able to break the lease at the end of the 3rd year, which I believe would take us to around May 1st of 2024. Again, if it's a town-owned building, with providing enough notice to the landlord. Slide 31 addresses some questions about adult education. I know there's been a lot of questions about that. Adult education is at the railroad station currently. During the day, there's approximately 117 students enrolled. 51% of those students live within a mile of the railroad station, so they walk to and from. There are approximately right now 7 students that attend the program that require transportation. We do hold additional classes at Mark T. Sheehan High School at night as well, but those programs are ones that the transportation is not an issue. So those may be short-lived programs that community members may be paying for. Through this process, with the potential relocation of adult ed, we did do a needs assessment to see exactly if we did have to move, what we would need space-wise moving forward. So we looked at 4 classrooms, a babysitting room, office space for the director, the clerical counselors, a reception area, and access to public transportation. That is one of the big components to this program. The timeline for this, again, is dependent on what is going to happen with the train station and where that's going to go. So we are planning, as you'll see in the last box, we have just kind of done some preliminary planning. We really took a look based on where we are right now at 100 South Turnpike and took a look at what it would be for a year lease, custodial and maintenance, the cost to move, and then what a grand total of that would be. And then the last component is the all-school study. I know there were questions on that. Silver Petroselli and Associates have been awarded the project. We have had some initial meetings with them. We met with them again today as a central office staff to discuss some additional documents and things they would need for us in terms of getting started and looking at all of our schools and what they would need from us in terms of meetings and what our current facilities look like in terms of number of classrooms and enrollment, staff, and then they will begin their process. They're hoping to have at least the first part of this done and be able to present to everyone probably for the September board meeting. So we still have some initial findings there, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Questions for the Board of Ed? Counselor Allenson.
Hi. So I wanted to find out, I actually asked this question after Board of Ed. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare you for this. After the Board of Ed question session, because I was looking at another part of the capital budget, and I saw that the Lyman Hall High School track was bonded, and I was wondering, now that I just heard you say 2007, maybe it's too short of a time period, but why would we not ask to bond the Sheehan track?
From what I understand, the life expectancy of the Sheehan track is the thing I believe that's keeping it from being bonded. So I don't know. I believe it's 10 years, correct?
I mean, we were under the impression that it had to be a 20-year life and over $20,000 for it to be a bondable item. That was our understanding. Now, we would be glad if you could bond it, but we didn't believe it was a bondable item based on the definitions of either the town or the mayor. That was our understanding of it.
Mr. Mayor, is a 20-year requirement part of the bonding? I'm sorry, I'm new here.
Generally, that's true.
That's true, okay.
In order to make something, significant, if it's a repair of an existing facility, that typically would not qualify.
Okay.
But
And $1 million is not, it's just repairing, it's not replacing?
It is replacing.
Okay,
Replacing the field, and I'm sure there's a whole lot of site work to
okay.
I do want to just make one comment. The town may not be able to bond it, but it does not mean that we would not be eligible as a town to approach the state for bond funding. Lyman Hall did receive bonding from the state,
Which I saw,
even though
yeah.
the town didn't bond the project.
Okay.
So we would again explore every opportunity for bonding from the state. We may be asking the mayor if we could use an opportunity with the STEEP grant. STEEP has historically funded at least seven different projects for artificial turf and athletic facilities across the state. But we would first go to the bonding, and we just learned of a district not too far from here that received $500,000 this month for a bonding project for artificial turf and for their fields. So we will explore everything. Right now, it's getting the numbers in place as to what will it cost to repair or replace the track around the field and the field. And we did explore, could we do one without the other, but you couldn't really take up the field without damaging the track. They both really do need to be done together.
Sure, sure, okay. I have one more question too, and this is on sustained services. Well, it's strategic plan, but sustained services. I see another 300,000 or so in the first two priorities for staff, and you know how it went when I was on the board with instructional coaches. I'm always, how is it going as far as the middle school is concerned? Because I believe that was the most recent. Just, can I have more information on how it's going so far? Because I just want to be able to understand that piece.
Absolutely. So we have been very fortunate, in the grant funding for COVID has helped tremendously, that we could, go ahead and add additional instructional coaches in addition to what we already have, and it has been extremely successful. All staff, a lot of the feedback we've received is positive. People are appreciating the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues, to plan, to look at data and student analysis, and provide, an opportunity to kind of reflect on what's happening, share materials, plan together, model lessons, discuss what's best for students and how to move them forward academically. So it has been extremely successful and very beneficial. The emails we've received from staff have all been, please keep them, can you add more? So it has been definitely a wonderful experience.
Awesome, thank you.
And operationally, I just want to add, when we talk about the using of the grant funding, we know that this grant funding for COVID is going to go away. So what we ended up doing, this was a great opportunity to actually have an application process for our existing teachers who may want to step out of their classroom for a year and have professional development, an abundance of professional development, and hire teachers with the COVID funds in one-year term contracts. So those teachers are in the classroom, and then through the interview process, teachers were selected to receive targeted instructional PD relative to their grade levels in their schools. And that on the state level has been considered a best practice for use of COVID funds.
That's awesome. I kind of remember vaguely something back in August, September. So thank you very much for that.
Counselor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just wanted to know if you could explain just a little bit more about the facility study. I've been hearing about it, but I guess kind of the elephant in the room is, I don't know if this involves the two high schools, if this is separate, or if you could just explain.
So it's, yes, it's all schools right now. We actually met with them again today to discuss exactly what they will be doing. So it is all schools. So originally it was, when they first had come through, it was just the middle schools and high schools, looking at enrollment, looking at our facilities in terms of utilization and space, and projecting out how many years. So they're going to do that for all of our buildings now. So that will be expanded to include all of our buildings, including central office, our family resource center that's at the Wallingford Public Library. Any programs we have off-site that we don't feel like right now we have enough, like adult ed, in the future, could we have space for that? Could all of us at central office potentially be in one of the buildings? So they're going to look at all of that and look at the needs we have and where we are, and they're going to help project, some suggestions in terms of enrollment they'll obviously do, and then space. So.
Okay, great. And now, is this the same group that did the high schools and middle schools study, or is this a different group? Same. Okay. Good. So they're familiar with things. Good. Okay.
And
then,
I'm sorry, can I add to that?
Yeah, of course.
So I also wanted to mention that we had multiple conversations with the state, and the state kind of flip-flopped a little bit. They first said, just do what you want to, give us the study for whatever schools you want to renovate. Hence, we went and did the middle school, high school study. Going back to the state, they said, no, we need a master facilities plan for all schools. So the plan that we are now, that the board has approved and is now being done, actually, it will satisfy the request or the recommendation in the town's master plan of conservation and development. I just looked it up, page 45. So it will satisfy the request that the Board of Ed do a master facilities study. So that will be obviously all of the schools. When we talk about multiple meetings with the state and we talk about multiple directions that they have directed us, I'm sure everybody's aware of what the school projects and capital issues have been at the state level and the investigations going on at the federal level. We were given information in one of our meetings that we needed to present to the state different options. Would we want one? Would we want two high schools? And the state would decide what was best for us and then tell us what the funding rate, reimbursement rate would be based on their decision. That has, since there's been change in administration at the highest level there, that has been turned around. And it has been made clear that there is no statutory obligation or authority for the state to tell us whether or not we want one or two high schools. It is 100% a community decision. So when we move forward with the process and we get the results back, it will be a community decision. And we're just going to have to keep reminding people that, you know, this is new guidance from the state. We were originally told, present both options and the state would tell you which one they would reimburse at a better rate. But they're not making the decision any longer. That hasn't been the case with some towns that have already gone through and done renovations. The state has directed them with previous administration, but that is no longer the case. So just wanted to share.
Great, thank you. No, that helps, thank you. My only other question, this is not something I need tonight, but I know somebody had brought up at the public hearing, and I don't think it was a question, I think it was more of a statement, but they had mentioned cost per student of area towns in Wallingford compared to area towns, and I just think that might be something helpful to look at, if that's something you could maybe send. And then also, and this might be a little more difficult, if it's not possible, it's okay, but I was also just curious for my own education, just to, if we have a comparison of also maybe like test scores or like standardized test scores. I'm sure there's an array of different ones. So if that's too difficult to get during budget season, it's fine. I'm just kind of curious to see, you know, cost per student and how we're doing in comparison to other, I don't know if they still use DERGs. I've been out of but you saw the DERG, is that still a thing? Okay, so I've been out of it for a while, but if we could just have a comparison, just for myself, not even so much related to the budget, but I would just like to see that. And I know somebody had brought up the cost per student at the hearing, so. And again, no rush, I know that's a big ask right now, but.
It's actually easy to get to. There's a website, EdSite, EdSIGHT. If you just Google EdSite,
Yep.
you can put in any district and you can see all of the costs. You can see scores. There's town profiles. The one thing, and this is actually very timely, it came up on the Connecticut Association of Board of Eds in the listserv. It's very difficult to look at the percentages, even of a town budget, how much is education, how much is general government, because everybody puts things in different buckets. In some districts, their cost per student doesn't include benefits. The town carries all of the benefits. In some districts, if there's a deficit in cafeteria, the town absorbs it. In some districts, the pension may just be for teachers and not for all of the other employees. It may be on general government. So yes, we could definitely provide a number, but it's not going to be apples to apples. You really have to peel it apart and kind of see what's composing each number for each district for it to make logical sense. So to pick up a newspaper and say, you know, such and such town is $10 million less than Wallingford and they have the same number of students, you don't know where all their costs are. So it's difficult to say that they're delivering the same level of education at a cheaper price. I'm not trying to dodge the question, I'm just trying to be factually accurate.
No, I understand it. I even see some of that, like in the memorandum line that was in our budget, and things that are in the budget, but not specifically, attributable to the Board of Ed, so I can definitely see that. So thank you, I appreciate that. And yeah, so don't even worry about getting that for me. I can just go on that website. So one less thing for you to worry about. I'll just go on the website myself. So that is all I have. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just have a couple of quick questions. Some of the other ones I wanted to ask already got asked. So can you help me out the difference between special ed and 504? What's the difference between those two groups, the way that we carry out the education for them? Just like a 50,000-foot level, I don't need a lot of real detail.
So special education is when they receive an individualized education plan. They attend a PPT. It's a parent and a teacher. We do specified testing for them, and then we develop yearly objectives and goals and provide it. Either it's reading, math, it could speech and language support services, and so we take a look at that for those students. Special education teachers, along with classroom teachers and others, provide support for that child. When you look at 504, those are a medical plan. So it could be students that have things for food allergies, like a peanut allergy. It could be anxiety, depression. It could be those pieces where then we take a look at that plan and provide supports for that child moving forward, tailored to what they need based on that.
Okay, so
they're both legal documents. They're just a little bit different.
All right, so there is a delineated difference between, okay. I noticed in your outline of your utility costs, you had identified that you do not have a contract for oil.
Correct.
All right, is there a strategic reason why that was the choice made?
Well, I think when we looked at it, it was kind of high, and we thought we'd wait, and it kept going higher.
So I guess, I guess my question maybe goes back farther than that. Like, if you had done that last year, you might have been locked into a lower rate now. Is there a reason we didn't do it before?
Well, hindsight being 2020, we should have locked in for 2 years, because, but we did not. We did a year to year on the oil. We never lock in on natural gas, or I shouldn't say we never, very rarely, I guess, on the natural gas. But it's something that we start looking at, and I look at it with the purchasing department, and it was a little bit high, and we thought we'd wait to see where, and then it just took off. And then,
Okay.
then it got too high to lock in at this point. I mean, so we think, we got to, well, we keep thinking it can't get any higher, but.
So it sounds like you normally do lock it in. You reached a point where the lock-in period ended. You assessed it at the time it had gone up, and you figured, all right, we'll wait it out. We can go each month, and if it drops down more, maybe we'll try to lock, and it just took off.
Okay.
So it's just
Pretty much,
bad.
yeah. We're locked in, right, I guess, just to clarify, we're locked in through June 30. Okay,
Okay.
we lock it in for basically the fiscal year. Now it's, we should have locked in 2 years. That would have been, we would have looked like geniuses, but, we did it year to year, and it just, I guess if we would have locked in 2 years, a few years back, we would have been at the other end, because it would have been a lot lower. So, it's a risk. And when we look at it in the November, December timeframe, it was just higher, and the thought was, let's see what happens, and then it took off.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
nobody knows. Nobody has a crystal ball, right? So my last question is, and I've asked this before, snow days and remote learning. Is there a reason why we don't leverage that? So if we've got a snow day, and rather than canceling school, kick off remote learning, have them do reading, I'm oversimplifying it, obviously, but sitting on my side of it with 4 kids, I think that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I would think that if they had a standby contingency for a day they couldn't go to school, even if they gave a pop quiz or read the next chapter or whatever the case might be, I look at it like an opportunity to not have students going later in the year. These are additional days where we wouldn't be running utilities in the summer because we're going to be capturing those days in the winter. Was there a reason why we opted to not do these things? Just go back to traditional, if it snows, we're going to cancel.
Right, so the reason why is because the state has not granted us the approval to do it. So we cannot do, to your point of making a snow day or remote learning day, we do not have the option to do that. So,
We had it, did we have it during COVID though, or no? Was that?
we
Yeah.
did,
Yeah,
but,
okay.
right,
But they
but
took that
then they
away.
took that away this year as well. So that, and then last year, we did not approve doing it that way.
And Counselor Zandri, there is, I know from one parent's perspective, it does seem pretty simple that we could do that. There are actually task forces looking at how to make a remote day accessible to everybody. Because as you just identified before, the special ed students and the 504 students, they need equal access to that education. So how would they necessarily be able to access the curriculum in a virtual environment? That's all that has to play into it, and they have to make sure that if we are counting a day, that there's a meaningful educational benefit and the instruction is accessible to all students. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes, and, well, not even behind the scenes, in public committees, going into what does remote instruction really look like that delivers the quality of instruction that we would count towards instructional hours and requirements for graduation.
And I appreciate that, and I'm probably oversimplifying it to a degree. One could counter with the same type of argument that when we're in school on June 20th, people have mentally checked out too. So I don't want to go back and forth on it. It sounds like a decent explanation. The state wouldn't let you do it. If they let you do it someday, maybe there would be ways to consider it. I'm glad to hear it wasn't something that I've engaged other parents on, different discussions about, oh, let the kids have a snow day. And I'm like, well, then send them out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon then. But I appreciate that you guys, it sounds like you looked at it and they said, well, we got to stop. The state said no, so we're all done. We can't even look at it. So, I mean, I appreciate that part of the effort too. I think all the material here, and I don't have a lot of questions, honestly, because a lot of the material you've provided is very well outlined, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for doing all this back-end work so we could look at it and pretty much digest it well, and for all the service that you provide all year round. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Carmody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. This is my first budget process, and so I'm learning a lot, and I also appreciate the amount of information you have provided us this evening. I do have a few questions. Chairperson Raccio, you mentioned with regard to I think with regard to the high schools being combined or remaining separate, that is a community decision. And when you said that, I was curious, who in the community makes that decision? Is it the Board of Ed? Is it the town council? Does it go to referendum? How does that process work?
It will not be made by just 9 board members, I can assure you that.
Okay.
That's a conversation that we will have to have. We don't have the funding to build a new high school or renovate 2 high schools, so it's going to come from the town council, the mayor's office, the community. Whether or not you guys decide to put it on as a referendum question, whether or not you have public hearings, that is something that once we have recommendations of different options, we will bring it to you and we will share it with the community and we will ask for feedback and direction which way to go.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I also have a question about the Silver Petroselli and Associates needs assessment for the school system. Where in the process is that now? Has it begun, or are we complete, or where do things stand?
We just started, so they were just awarded this project. So we are really in the beginning stages. This was the second meeting we had with them today. to review exactly what we need to provide them with, and then they will then start the whole process of going out and touring the schools, meeting with our building administrators. They started with us at central office. Mr. Deptula they've met with already, and so we're going to branch out. So it is very much so in the beginning stages.
Okay.
And to your point earlier, it will all be shared with the public. We'll start in September when he comes back and his team comes back with all of their findings in terms of the needs assessment. So we'll share that out, and they'll help guide us with next steps and what all of this information tells us
Sure.
moving forward. So everyone will be involved as we move through.
Okay, and with regard to that, will adult education be part of that needs assessment?
Yes, so that was something we discussed today as well. So adult education would be included. We'd also look to include the central office component, so all of our staff that are housed there. Any programs we have off-site, like we have the Family Literacy Center, we're housing it right now at the Wallingford Public Library. So those components, our wish is to have all of that brought back to us.
And so this question that I'm about to ask is probably premature. Obviously, we're looking for a new location for adult education. Will that be included in this needs assessment that Silver Petroselli and Associates
Yes,
are going to be doing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It will be.
And I assume this will also be included, but do you foresee any changes in the curriculum or in staffing levels with regard to adult education moving forward?
So adult education, when I looked at the current numbers that we have, the past 2 years, they've declined a little bit based on the pandemic. You know, in talking to the current director, Mrs. Govan, you know, it's not typical. So we are looking to see, and we are anticipating that the numbers will increase. In previous years, they were around 145 students, 150 students. It does fluctuate depending on the time of the year. Students may start with the program and then drop out, then come back. So there is that little bit of that. But for the most part, I think it's usually a much higher enrollment than we're seeing right now. And so the hope is to continue to bring that back and to continue to grow it.
Sure. And I just want to point out, in your report, you do mention that 51% of these students live within a 1 mile radius of the train station, and I hope that wherever the new home for our adult education program is somewhere in that same vicinity, so that it's accessible to everyone who needs it.
Yes, you know, we've been looking and working with Tim Ryan as well, and trying to brainstorm some opportunities here within the town that may come up potentially in the next year or two that may align with the potential changes for the railroad station that hopefully are on the bus line, because I do feel like that is a big piece. We did discuss the possibility of reaching out. I know I discussed it with the mayor as well, to the transit authority, to see if there's any way to change if it's not something that's on the bus line. That's not ideal. You know, we can always brainstorm other ideas, but really on the bus line would be ideal for our students.
I think that's great. You know, I'm a big advocate for the revitalization of our downtown. I live downtown, and I would love to see the train station utilized in a way that brings people down there for entertainment purposes or for dining, but I don't want it to jeopardize our adult ed program. I think that is much more important than having fun in our downtown area. I do have just another quick question.
Sure.
Am I correct with, on page 25, am I correct to see that the Board of Ed received $9.4 million in COVID relief funds?
Yes, from the start to now, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and you'll see on the last column, it will indicate how long they're for and when they are ending. So their terms are all different, and each one, you know, has its specific guidelines in terms of funding and what we can allocate the money towards, but yes, overall.
Okay, because I do see a lot of it has to do with special ed and other areas, you know, around that category. I was curious, however, you know, in your 2% fund summary, you know, was there a potential to use any ARPA funds for any of those projects that you've listed there? Energy efficiency, equipment, security. I was curious if any of the ARPA funds or COVID relief funds could be used in that.
So they are really specific, so it depends on what would fall under some of these. They are very specific as to what we can use them for.
Okay.
You know, they give us primarily buckets of guidelines for each one. So a lot of it has really gone to technology for our students, additional staffing for our students, PPE. So it's really centered around that.
Okay.
So these items would be separate from that.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to educate me on your budget. I appreciate your time this evening.
I just want to add,
Sure.
on the 2%, we do have some grant money supporting some of those projects, primarily the security. There's some state grants that we get occasionally to do some of the security, and also we got a federal grant for, I think we classified it as security, but to bring in software, a product called Securely, which helps filter what students are searching for and notifies us if there's concern. So we do supplement some of that with grant money. Sometimes we get something that's an 80-20 share or 50-50, and we do some projects that way there.
Great. Well, thank you for your time.
Counselor Laffin.
Thank you, and I'm sorry if I'm spacing on this from years past or something else. I was flipping through everything again. The 2% fund summary has the special ed contingency line of $647,973. And I see a general contingency line in the system-wide portion of the budget in that 62-page file of stuff. In my remembering things differently or wrong from when I was on the board? I know it was over 10 years ago and stuff, but like, so does the special ed not have a separate budget line, contingency line? And this is where now we have all special ed contingency coming out of the 2%? Did we kind of shift towards that, or am I just remembering that we never had that?
Well, the 2% contingency, we set it aside because of the fluctuation in the tuitions.
Yep.
And also the reimbursements associated with it from the state. There's, on the grant pages, there's something called the excess cost grant.
Yep.
And that, that can fluctuate on the reimbursement rates, et cetera. So we set that up because of the fluctuations strictly for that. The contingency in the operating budget or the general fund is driven based more on items that we think we may encounter, whether it's bringing on more paras or other teaching staff, et cetera, that happens during the year that we just haven't identified yet. So they're the paras would probably be on the special ed side, but a lot of the other things would not. But the 1 and the 2% is really because of the services and the tuitions and the services and the associated transportation with those items.
Okay, so you're looking in that fund to be separate and different from operational costs and just like a one-time you need to pull from it. Now, what do you do though? You don't then do you or do you not pull the salaries for a para out of that 2% fund, because that would create a recurring cost?
We typically wouldn't. We typically pull it out of the operating budget if we had capacity. If we did not, then we would have to figure out how to pay for it.
Okay.
It is a moving target. To your point, Councilor Laffin, there are students who leave our district who had paras, and there are students who move into our district who need paras. So Assistant Superintendent Turner is constantly looking at that line item and adjusting with the ebb and flows of our enrollment. One other thing with contingency on the general side that you were talking about, separate from the 2% fund, is that has historically also been the place that we go to fund cafeteria losses. Because the Board of Ed, when we'll get to cafeteria, it's a much different place this year than it has been in previous years. But it has always carried a deficit, and we have had to fund that from the Board of Ed side. And that's another area, Councilor Tata, when you look at district to district, who funds deficits for cafeteria, it's different district to district. In Wallingford, we've always funded it out of Board of Ed. And in some years, that was $500,000. So we're fortunate to not have to fund that much of it this year. It was a $100,000 transfer. So that's another reason that we need to have the contingency on the general side. And the 290,000 is what it's at now for over 100 million.
Yeah, no, I completely understand why we have you have the general contingency. I was trying to recall or remember if I thought back in the day, there used to be a separate special ed contingency for that same purpose, but it was just in the other, sorry, I'm motioning my iPads on the paper like that's the thing for you. I'm looking at your budget proposal on my iPad, where in the actual, function
Line
budget
item.
versus, line
Yeah,
item.
yeah.
That's what I was trying to
It's just
reconcile.
earmarked in contingency, so we show two separate amounts, the special ed and then the unallocated.
Okay, all right. That's it, thank you.
So, in your presentation, you talked about severance benefits. So you project between certified staff and non-certified staff about $400,000. I'm just curious, what's the formula? Are you certain they're going to be retirements?
So contractually, certified staff have to hand in or let us know that they are retiring by November 1st. So they'll let the personnel office know, they'll hand in their letter, we bring it through the Board of Education, it gets accepted. And the reason why they do that is because then we can then plan for them to receive their benefits. So that's kind of how it's set up contractually. If they choose to do that after November 1st, then per the contract, they have to wait till the following year to receive their benefits. So most of them do.
I was going to say, so some of that amount could actually be somebody who decided to retire after November in the previous year, and we didn't pay it out because it was after we set the budget.
Okay.
So they may have to wait. And we also, on the non-certified, we've been changing contracts to make it, when you put in your notification, then you have to retire. So we have a better idea.
No take-backs?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we did have, some of the contracts.
That's not quite the language, but pretty much that's the
So
That's how it was.
just in terms of the calendar, is what you've budgeted based upon what you knew this past November, and you're going to pay it in the next fiscal year? Or,
Correct.
okay.
That'll be paid in June of, so basically the first month of the fiscal year. By contract, July, I'm sorry.
July.
Has to be paid in July.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You had me confused with the June. Okay.
My bad.
That was my only question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would, we don't have public, but Counselor Tata is back.
Sorry, that just brought me to one more question. I'm looking at the 2022-23 Board of Ed employee wage rates sheet that you provided. So it looks like the majority of our teachers, 273 teachers, have their sixth year degree and are making $101,534, correct? It looks like that's the biggest chunk of our teachers. Is that, that's definitely the biggest. That's the largest group, it looks like, by far. Is this also something that I can find on that website, like teacher compensation, like how we're relating to other towns as far as how we pay our teachers?
So on our website as well are all of our contracts. And then there is a site, I'd have to get it to you, that you can compare other contracts. All of district websites have their teacher contracts, all of their contracts listed on their websites. So you can go ahead in. Contracts vary depending on, it can be just a bachelor's, then a master's, then sixth year. Some will pay bachelor's plus 15 credits. So you will see a little bit of a difference as you go through, but you can sort of get an idea as to where we fall in comparison to some of the other districts.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
And this is,
You're welcome.
This is not anything specific to Board of Ed. I compared general government
It's
to
okay.
other towns all the time. I just like to see how we're, how other towns do things and how we compare. So great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
No other hands up here, so thank you very much for your presentation, your hard work, and we're on to the cafeteria.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm James Bondi, the District Food Service Director. For our 2022-2023 cafeteria budget, the proposed budget is based on what we now call a normal year, a normal school year. As mentioned before, the COVID universal feeding will end as of June 30th. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
So the COVID universal feeding will end as of June 30th, which means that all of those not eligible for free or reduced meals in the next school year will need to pay for those meals, and the government reimbursement rate will be reduced to what we call normal levels. Currently, we're receiving $4.56 for each meal that we serve for lunch, and $2.60 for each breakfast meal. That is projected to go down to 37 cents for each paid meal next year, $3.41 for each reduced meal, and $3.81 for each free meal next year. So on the revenue side, you will see that reduction. The budget assumes an increase in paid lunches as a residual effect of universal feeding compared to prior years. And I'm anticipating about 40 per day because we currently are doing a phenomenal rate of participation for our students. So I'm hoping that that carries over into the new school year. I'm sure it will. Again, total revenues reflect the reduction in reimbursement and state grant payments due to COVID relief funds being eliminated for next year. On the product cost side, product cost reflects the anticipated increases in rising cost of meats, groceries, and produce. As of now, I don't foresee them going down. We need to go out to bid very soon, so those bids are going to be most likely much higher than last year, unfortunately. We do anticipate inflationary pricing to continue. Surprisingly, paper costs reflect an easing of supply line issues. We're experiencing that now. We seem to be almost normal in our paper deliveries and supply. Our payroll costs assumes the operation is fully staffed, and all full-time and part-time cafeteria associates will resume their normal pre-COVID hours due to lunch shifts reverting back to those we had prior to COVID, and the elimination of any special service methods. At one point, we were serving in classrooms on half days this year. We are no longer doing that. Our other costs reflect typical costs per year with an increase in maintenance equipment due to our aging equipment and the fact that we will probably need to purchase some equipment next school year. Just a note on breakfast service also, we're in the process of extending school breakfast to the elementary and middle schools this year, which may slightly increase the surplus for the next school year. Although in normal times, it's a net neutral operation for school breakfast. And that being said, we have a surplus. We are showing a surplus of $1,481 on the cafeteria budget.
So this budget is less than 2% of the total Board of Ed budget.
It's a standalone budget.
Sure.
Yes.
But 4 of you present it. I'm impressed with the efficiency.
I don't want to be all by myself up here.
Yeah. Okay. So in the interest of trying to maintain it as an enterprise fund, which I know it can't be anymore, but basically you're looking at $380,000 cash from the Board of Ed to balance the budget. Is that an oversimplification?
In this budget, it's projected as almost break even.
Oh, I see that now. That was this year.
Correct.
This fiscal year. So okay. You said that at the end, a $1,400 surplus. And 4 people. Okay. Counselor Laffin.
Thank you. All right, so rising costs, as we talked about with the inflation, but we're hearing or planning for, we've been told the state is going to reimburse less. Is there any talk or rumor, at least, that the state will pivot on that and
Not so much on the
acknowledgement?
state level. Well, what's happening is the Senate, the United States Senate did not allocate any money to continue the universal COVID feeding. There was talk of a bill, another bill, to extend that for next school year. I don't believe it's gone anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's getting late in the season, so I kind of don't think that it's going to happen.
So universal feeding aside, just the normal free lunches and that reimbursement being lower.
Correct.
Is there there's no talk or discussion about compensating the
Not that I'm
districts
aware of.
more because of the cost of increase?
Not that I'm aware of at this point, although there is a huge backlash across the country.
Right.
Concerning that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Counselor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm sorry,
Chairman.
can I just, I had to reach for the microphone.
It's too late, no.
Too late.
Time's
But it's
up.
for you, Mr. Laffin. To your point about the supply and the increases, the amount that we're getting reimbursed now from the federal government, that has gone up over time simply because of that. So we would just randomly get a notice saying, you're going to get an extra 30 cents a meal because of the supply issues and the increased costs. So the reimbursement rate that we're getting in the COVID-free period was not the reimbursement rate we first started at when COVID started.
Okay.
They have tried to take that into account over time, but it is obviously sunsetting, which is a concern.
And you do not expect there to be that sort of give in for next year? Like, you don't expect
'Cause that's
in
a-
October to get a notice saying you're going to get 30 cents now
That
instead of
would
the
be
342?
wonderful, but that's a
Would be
federal
wonderful, but currently,
program.
we don't expect that.
Right, okay.
To make it a little bit worse, on the state side, the state has passed legislation, it was either pre-COVID or at the beginning of COVID, that if a child does not pay for their meal, you still need to provide it day after day after day. After so many days, you should provide that family with community information as far as food pantries and services, but you have to feed the child, even if they don't have the funds. So there could be a family that their child takes lunch every single day and doesn't pay for it,
Right.
and we will be paying for it.
Now, is that meal, though, that's not just them picking up whatever they want out of the line? At that
It would be
stage,
a meal.
they get like a peanut butter and jelly?
No more
we-
lunch
We
shaming.
cannot discriminate like that.
So they
That's
they
lunch
still
shaming.
pick whatever they want?
They can take
It
whatever
would be,
choice.
it would be a regular meal, so they couldn't go get 5 orders of French fries and 3 cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
Like, it's not.
Even the kids on that, I'm not talking about the free lunch group. 'Cause
No.
that's different.
But you would
We're talking about the
have
people
a
that aren't paying their
regular,
bills.
right, they would still get a regular meal. You can't, that's what they call it if you give a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's lunch shaming.
Yes.
And you can't single a student out for that because they didn't have the funds. That's identifying a student, which can obviously lead to
no, I get
other
it,
issues
yeah.
of bullying and whatnot. So as a district, the state, we have to provide a regular meal and then try to work with the family.
So do
Maybe
kids not-
provide the free and reduced lunch application, maybe work with the family if there's other food issues and security issues. But we can no longer say, you've got this, you can't even give them a red slip at the cash register to say that your account's going to be negative tomorrow. It is really, they've really tightened up on that.
So are kids choosing the chicken tenders because they want the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but they're going to get made fun of for picking it? Like, is that what it's come to?
Do we sell peanut butter?
I don't think,
jelly sandwiches?
I
don't
keep
think
saying
we
that.
do.
I don't think there's any peanut butter.
No,
in
they
there.
can have
Jelly
whatever
sandwiches,
choice
I don't
of meal
know.
they want, yes.
Sun butter,
Nutella, I don't know.
Wonder butter.
Yeah,
Aren't you
what
glad
is-
that I came back and
Yeah,
gave you more on
thanks.
that question?
All right, I'm done, thanks.
You sure?
No, I thought I was last time, and somebody else said I wasn't.
Counselor Zandri.
That's okay, because now I have 2 questions. So I'm going to go with the original one that I had. So on the current fiscal year, the fiscal year 21-22, there's a direct contribution of $144,000, and right now you're generating a profit of $300,000. Given that, why make the contribution?
It was a cash flow issue earlier in the year. the reimbursement from the feds is 2 months behind the revenue. So coming through the summer where there was very little reimbursement, it was really going to be, they were running out of cash. And it was to make sure that we didn't run out of cash in the program.
Okay, and then at the end of the year, if that bucket were to remain, 6 figures-ish to the positive, is that rolled back to the 2% fund or the request to roll it up to the 2% fund? Or, oh no, actually cafeteria is separate, right? So what would you do with a surplus like that?
We could leave it in the fund and they could use it the following year, or it could revert back to the operating budget, the general fund.
So you would have the opportunity to offset costs in the future if there was a profit left behind. Is that the case?
Offset in the.
Microphone, please.
Food service only.
Yes.
Right. The food service side, right, I understand that, yeah. All right, so now, Ms. Raccio, you went on with that, so now I'm going to ask. What controls do we have to not have what you just described slip into anarchy? And let me give you an example. I understand the entire mindset of, we're not going to, first off, I don't want anybody going hungry, period. So I'll just start with that, okay? But I also have problems if I feel like a system is being taken advantage of, which it can be. So if we've got a student that comes in that cannot pay for the lunch, and you have to continually give that student a lunch, what happens to other families that just decide, hey, Johnny's getting it for free, I'm not going to fund those accounts anymore. My meal pay plus, I'm not going to fund it. Go get it free like everybody else does. That slips everything into anarchy. So what controls do we have to circuit break that?
Well, if I can comment, we need to be very discreet as to who can pay, who cannot pay. So no one really knows, because at the register, the student cannot see it, or other students can't see it. So we need to maintain that level of confidentiality. Thank you. So it does happen where certain individuals will take advantage of that, and no matter how much we reach out to the family, through the school counselors and whatnot, you just don't get an application, but we still have to feed the student. Very rarely it goes over maybe 1, 2, 3 people a school year, but it does happen.
And Mr. Zandri, to your point, I think the effort is better for our students and our population if we focus on the other side of that. If you look at page 4 on your, in your Board of Ed packet, you'll see that there was one year that there was a huge increase in the enrollment of free and reduced lunch. 2018 to the 2018-19, it went from 1307 to 1776.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that's the year that we moved the free and reduced lunch program to an online application. So parents didn't have to put their financial data in Johnny or Susie's backpack and send it into the teacher, to the principal, to food service to get it processed. So by doing that, and then also telling the parents, look, this is greater than free and reduced lunch. If you qualify for this program, you get college applications waived. You get things in College Board waived. You get SAT scores waived. There's certain camps and programs in the community that if you're a free and reduced lunch student, if you already have that status, you get access to that. So it's more of an educational campaign that it's not just the meals. The meals are very important. We don't want any child to go hungry, and that's why we're even trying to bring in breakfast. But we've done a great job with guidance and with the administrators in the buildings to really educate the parents as to what the value is of, if you qualify for this, please apply. We want to make sure your child is receiving all the benefits from that. And I think for like Mr. Bondi said, there are a handful of parents that know that nothing can happen if they don't do that, but for the most part, our parents don't want to do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with that. And it sounds like you've got a process in place, and that's my main concern. First off, if they apply for free or reduced lunch and they are qualified and they're accepted, we get full reimbursement for that, don't we?
Absolutely.
Right, and that's to me where I want to be. That's a win-win. We're reimbursed, the student gets to eat, and nobody decides or feels like this is unfair and I'm going to take advantage of the system and just steamroll because I don't want to see that. I want to see the ability to take a corrective action. If someone's not paying, well, why? And like you said, you have to be discreet about it, and you have got to be protecting of the student and the family situation. But I want to be able to make sure that we are as whole as we can be on our side while we're doing the right things for the student and making sure they eat and then they get a balanced education on top of it. So that makes me a little bit more comfortable on that, because I look at that situation where you get people that just simply get fed up and they say, listen, this one gets free this one gets free that. I get nothing and I work 60 hours a week. I'm done with it. I'm just going to go south on it, and I don't want that.
We will do everything we can at the Board of Ed to make sure that that money comes to the federal government as a reimbursement instead of a Board of Ed transfer.
Awesome. I'm in. Thank you. Thank you. That was my add-on question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Tata?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this may be for Mr. Senna, actually, but I'm looking at the special fund budget for the cafeteria, and it looks like the year-end fund balance proposed for the upcoming year is $740,533, which takes into account the $1,481 expected profit. Where does that $740,000 sit? And is that the current balance of it, or is that just what we project next year will be put into it?
I didn't prepare these spreadsheets, so I don't know where
Sorry.
these numbers came from, but, if the numbers in the audit report in the special revenue funds, it all gets reported there. So there is a cafeteria fund that has the fund balance. I don't have it with me to.
So is that considered to be part of our general fund balance?
No, it's
not.
its own special revenue fund just for the cafeteria.
Okay. So do we know what the balance in that is currently?
I would say the cash balance is probably, the beginning fund balance or the cash balance?
Well, I'm looking for, so it's showing a year-end fund balance of $740,000, $745,33. So I'm just wondering I'm just not sure where that appears. I mean, I'm assuming that's money that's sitting somewhere.
Well,
Is it-
that,
Are you looking?
at the end,
I'm looking at this, sorry, this was the very bottom.
Are you looking at next year, 2023?
Yes. The very bottom line, year-end fund balance.
that would be within that fund. That fund operates on its own, and that would sit in that cafeteria fund. And then when they have, if they have a rough year, we wouldn't transfer the money in because they would have the money.
Right, okay. So, but do we know what the balance is right now, currently? Is there money sitting in there?
Well, in the second column, Counselor Tata, and at the top of the third column, so last year's ending balance was 292, and therefore it's this year's beginning. And if we have a net profit loss, which is a profit of 447, then we're anticipating to end this year, at the end of June, with the 739,052. So that will be what will be in the special fund at the end of this year.
Okay.
So at the beginning of the year, I think that's what you're getting at. There was
Yes.
292 at the beginning of this year.
Yes, that is.
So- But I'll add, that's not cash, that's the fund balance.
Right.
So typically, they would probably have a receivable from the federal government of a couple $100,000 based on the June and possibly the May receivables, that would come up to the fund balance. But that would not be cash because there's a timing issue on when they get a lot of their revenue.
Oh, yes, understood, okay. Thank you. So I think a few years back, long before I was involved in this, but I remember hearing about, I think it used to be the opposite, right? So the cafeteria was running substantial deficits every year. So the fact that maybe we might have $740,000 at the end of next year, I think
It may cover us if we end up back in that situation.
Yeah, do you force, I guess it's good to have that buffer, but then I also want to make sure that that buffer's not getting huge either if we have, do you think there could be an ebb and flow where you might need that in another year and then it's there and that's a good?
Mr. Bondi, can you repeat, and I don't remember, and I know it's in your notes, what are we getting reimbursed from the federal government for a meal now during COVID, and what will we get after COVID?
We are getting $4.56 for lunch meals and $2.60 for breakfast meals. Next year it goes down to, again, you have 3 different categories next year, 37 cents for each paid meal, $3.41 for each reduced meal, and $3.81 for each free meal.
And what's our average paid meal next year? Like at the middle school, just how much is a middle school lunch? I know.
You're really going to.
I know, I'm sorry. But it's not going to equate. So if you,
Is it $3.25, I believe?
I think it's $3.25 and then 37 cents or something. So it's going to be close to $1 less that we're getting for each meal after COVID. Plus, right now, we're giving the meals away, literally. So everybody is taking them. Our participation rate is not going to be 100% when families are paying for these meals. And we're going to be getting reimbursed $1 less a meal. So that, I would hope that I come before you next year and that this is still a positive number. It's not going to grow.
Okay.
And there-
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
There's also, I mean, there's regulations on this program, so the money it generates needs to be reinvested in the program. So, I mean, you know, if we put money in, I think we can take it out, but as far as all this is all, almost all federal money, and it needs to be within the program.
Okay.
If that helps.
Thank you. No, that explains it very well. Thank you. I think you can see just where I'm going. I'm glad that it's a good problem to have. I just want to make sure that it's, you know, the fund isn't growing and growing, but it sounds like that's not
I
what's
wish
going
it
to
was
happen.
long-term.
Yeah, I wish that were the problem. But, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Counselor Lappin.
Thank you, sorry. And if you don't know, that's fine, I'm just curious. Do you have like an equation or a ratio that you know that for every lunch you sell, these are all the costs? Like, this is how much the cost of goods costs, this is how much we give a percentage of salary? How much of it is profit, you know?
Yeah. Breakfast is about $1.10
Okay.
cost. And I believe lunch.
If I could ask you to get on the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And I believe lunch was somewhere around $1.72 or 73, depending on the meal. It could be as high as $1.85.
That doesn't include staff, though, that's just the food?
No, that's just food cost.
That's just food. And then you have, do you have any equation that factors in the break even for the staffing system?
I believe at this point in time, the staff costs something like $1.23 per meal.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I could be a little bit off.
Like, do you know how many lunches you need to sell a year in
I
order to
don't
break even?
have that
Okay,
information.
I was just curious.
On hand.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the council? The only people in the gallery are people who are here with you. Quite a team. All right, well, thank you very much for your attention. That's it for this tonight. That's it for tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, and
Thank
I'll
you.
adjourn.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great evening.